What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you today with the waiver wire targets for week 4 of fantasy football. I'm going to be doing the waiver wire targets videos for the next couple of weeks. Then me and Danny will flip-flop, and then I'll go back to doing trade targets. He'll go back to doing waivers so that it doesn't get repetitive for you guys. So as Danny did for you guys the last 2 weeks, I'll be bringing you my top 5 waiver wire ads. My best of the rest are my honorable mentions, some of the guys that I think are traps this week, as well as 3 defenses that you can stream if you need a defense this week, and 3 quarterbacks that you can stream if you need a quarterback. So if you guys enjoy this video at any point, please go down to the bottom and hit the like button. It helps us out tremendously. Comment any of your thoughts down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We're going to hit the intro and then we're going to get into the first guy. So I kind of cheated. I said it was my top 5 waiver wire ads, but my first guy is actually 2 guys because they're both on the same team. It's Bryan Edwards and it's Hunter Renfrow, 17% owned and 11% owned respectively in Yahoo leagues. And everybody that I'm going to be talking about in this video will be less than 50% owned. So guys like Sony Michel and some other guys that I'll talk about as honorable mentions later, they're actually greater than 50% owned. So I'm not going to be talking about them here, but if they are available, go out and check them out. So with Edwards and Renfrow, these are guys that I'm only willing to spend about 5, maybe 6, 7% of my fab on because they are only kind of like depth receivers. But what I have seen with the Raiders is an offensive shift, basically. Not only are the Raiders running a more up-tempo and fast-paced offense in the NFL with a top 5 pass rate in neutral game scripts right now, they're also quite efficient, right? They are an offense that is currently averaging top 5 yardage in net yards per attempt. This is not an offense that is a dumpster fire like it was last year. This is not an offense that is just going to feed and feed and feed Josh Jacobs, regardless of how successful he's being. This is an offense that is actually passing the ball at a very high rate. They're using their young weapons. They're using Henry Ruggs. They're using Bryan Edwards. They're using Hunter Renfrow. Of course, we know that they were going to use Darren Waller as well. They're even using their fullback in the passing game. So this is an offense that's actually passing the ball quite a bit, which is really encouraging to see for some of these wide receiver options that are available. They're actually targeting their wide receivers as well at a much higher rate than they were last year. And the reason that the Raiders receivers were so useless last year, there was no valuable receivers in the Raiders receiving core last year, is because they ranked dead last in the NFL at targeting wide receivers at 47%. And this year they're about league average. They're about 60% right now, which is why we're seeing Hunter Renfrow and Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards be a lot more valuable. Renfrow, if you're looking for a guy that is a deep league PPR guy, let's say you're in a 3 wide receiver, 3 flex type of league that's a full PPR, I think Hunter Renfrow needs to be rostered in those kind of leagues because this is a guy that's seen 9 targets, 7 targets, and 6 targets through the first 3 games of the season. And this is a guy that Derek Carr relies on over the middle of the field, and I expect him to catch 4 or 5 balls a game. And if you just need a floor play at your, 3rd flex spot or whatever, I think you can get that out of Hunter Renfrow because this is a guy that we've seen consistently do exactly what he does well, which is get open, find the soft spots in zone coverage and create some plays that way. Bryan Edwards, on the other hand, is a little bit more of a ceiling play. He hasn't commanded the same target share that Hunter Renfrow has thus far in the season, but he does have 2 games so far with 80+ receiving yards, and he's been showing up in the 4th quarter and overtime of games. So from a real football perspective, you have to assume that John Gruden, Derek Carr, they might continue to trust him more if he's showing up in these important situations. So go out and pick out those 2 Raiders wide receivers if you guys need some receiver depth. On to the next guy, and this is much more of an upside swing than those previous guys that I just talked about. But my number 4 waiver wire target on the week is Rashod Bateman, wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens, currently 14% owned in Yahoo Fantasy leagues. This is a guy I'm more willing to spend 5, 10, maybe 12% of my fab on because we've seen a shift in this Baltimore Ravens offense as they pretty much talked about all offseason. And as I made reference to when I was talking up guys like Rashod Bateman and Mark Andrews, the Ravens are much more pass heavy than they've been in the past. And this Ravens team currently right now is ranking 24th in pace of play overall and 18th in neutral situations. Now, that doesn't sound like it's very good, but from where Baltimore was in previous years, that's a huge jump because they were literally dead last in pace of play like the previous couple of years, as well as in neutral situations. They were a very, very run heavy team. So the fact that they're more so league average or bottom third of the NFL is actually a huge jump. And that's what I talked about all offseason with Rashod Bateman and Mark Andrews. They rank 27th right now in total pass attempts. And again, this is a team that has been like 100 pass attempts in 32nd place. Like they were so far and away the most run heavy team in the NFL. But the fact that they're a lot more closer to the other teams that are, more run heavy is definitely a good sign for their total pass attempts. And as you guys can see on the screen, in neutral pass situations, you can see that Baltimore ranks amongst like the Seattle Seahawks, San Francisco 49ers, Colts, Denver Broncos. So they're a team that, yes, is run heavy still, but they are much less run heavy than they've been in the past. They've usually been where Tennessee is in this chart right here. They've usually been around that 40% neutral pass rate range. And right now they're passing the ball in neutral situations about 54% of the time, which is very encouraging to see. And with Rashod Bateman, the reason I like him so much as a waiver wire ad this week is because he provides their offense with what they've been trying to use Hollywood Brown to do. They're trying to use Hollywood Brown in this like possession receiver role, but that's not really what his job is. He's a deep threat. He's a guy that you can get in space and he can make plays after the catch. But they drafted Rashod Bateman in the first round this past year for a reason. They drafted him for that Allen Robinson-like skill set that he brings to the table. He will get open quickly. He will beat press coverage. He'll catch the ball. He'll get upfield and make some plays, but he's not like, an electric player after the catch. He is a possession receiver. That's exactly what he brings to the table. And it's the type of receiver that Lamar Jackson has been missing for pretty much his entire career in the Baltimore Ravens offense. And as you guys can see on the screen, Jeff Zrebiec of The Athletic reported that John Harbaugh said that Rashod Bateman will return to practice this week. So initially, when we heard about his injury, we heard week 5, week 6. It looks like he could return actually this week in week 4, but more likely he'll return in week 5. So this is a guy that if you're 3-0 or if you just need receiver depth in general, you could pick up this guy, stash him on your bench. Maybe you have to sit him again this week. But once we get this guy back into the Ravens offense, I think this can be legitimately a top, 20% target share of this Ravens offense right from the get-go, because in the preseason, we saw this guy doing some great things, especially in practice to guys like Marlon Humphrey. So I really believe in Rashod Bateman. He was my wide receiver 3 in the draft class coming in 2021. I really believe in this kid. I think he can carve out a huge role for himself in the Ravens offense. So if he's available in your league, go out and pick him up. Another guy that you should go out and pick up if he's available in your league, who's actually been producing, is Emmanuel Sanders, currently my 3rd highest waiver wire priority target right now, 26% owned in Yahoo Fantasy League. Again, 5 to 10% of your fab, maybe a little bit more than that if you're desperate for a wide receiver. Sanders is currently playing the old John Brown role from what we've seen in years past. 6, 6, and 8 targets in the first 3 games so far this year for Emmanuel Sanders. As I talked about with the Ravens, in neutral pass scripts, the Buffalo Bills are far and away the most pass-heavy team in the NFL. 0.72, so 72% of the time, they are passing the ball in neutral situations, meaning they're not leading by a whole lot or they're not losing by a whole lot. They just decide to be pass heavy. And it makes a lot of sense, right? Because they don't really have a great run game. They have Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. They're more complementary pieces to the offense. They're not really a centerpiece to the offense. So their offense runs through Josh Allen in the passing game. They use a lot of short passes to Cole Beasley's and Stephon Diggs and now Emmanuel Sanders. People are hesitant to trust a 3rd target in an offense because they think they're going to be boom or bust. But when the pie is as big as what the Buffalo Bills passing offense is, then you can actually trust a 3rd option in the offense. This isn't the Jacksonville Jaguars. This isn't, the Baltimore Ravens or the Tennessee Titans 3rd target where they're more run heavy teams or maybe they don't have the greatest quarterback play. We have an offense in Buffalo with an elite quarterback, very high pass rate, very high pace of play, and pretty much 0 run game. So this is an offense that is a pass funnel offense. And Emmanuel Sanders as the 3rd target can be a productive guy. He can be a wide receiver 3 for you week in and week out, just because that's how the Buffalo Bills operate. And him and Beasley can be kind of interchanged based on matchups. So if you guys need a wide receiver, maybe you lost Deontay Johnson or Juju or KJ Hamler, maybe you were desperate and you were starting a guy like him, Emmanuel Sanders is a guy that you need to go pick up ASAP, because I think he is a guy that you can throw into your lineup pretty much week in and week out and expect a 5, 6, 7, 8 target game. Number 2 waiver wire target on the list is Terrace Marshall Jr. of the Carolina Panthers, currently 14% owned. About 10 to 15% of the fab is what I would be spending on Terrace Marshall if he's available in your league. For those of you that don't know, rookie wide receiver from LSU. He was a 2nd round pick, I believe the 57th overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft. A guy that is a height, weight, speed type of receiver. He's 6'3", like 210 pounds, ran a 4.3 type of 40. So this is a guy that is very athletic, very big, has a prototype size that you want out of a wide receiver. And what we've seen from him so far in the NFL in his first 3 games is he's been not on the field quite a lot, right? He's been 65%, 55% route participation for the Carolina Panthers. But when he has been on the field, he's commanding targets. An 18% target share in his first NFL game on only 65% of the routes is good for a 25% target rate based on the routes that he's running. And in week 2, he was only on the field for 55% of the routes, but he did command a target on 13% of those, equating to basically a 19% target rate overall. And the encouraging thing that we've seen is Terrace Marshall running a route on 77% of the Panthers' plays so far in week 3. And this was towards the end of the game, so this number might even be higher. And that was a bump between week 1 and week 2. He hadn't left the field in 11 personnel. And that's really encouraging to see, especially considering that they just traded away their tight end. So the Panthers, if you guys don't know, they traded away for Jacksonville Jaguars corner CJ Henderson, a former top 10 pick, and they traded away Dan Arnold in the process. So what that tells me is that either 1, they're going to get Tommy Tremble more involved, who's a rookie tight end that they drafted from Notre Dame, or 2, they're going to go to a base 11 personnel offense and run their offense basically 85, 90% of the time out of 11 personnel, which is what I think is going to happen because we haven't seen this coaching staff utilize tight ends too much. So we saw this offense produce 3 top 30 wide receivers last year. Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, and Curtis Samuel were all productive for fantasy last year. Now, it looks like, based on the current dynamic of the receiving core right now, it looks like DJ Moore is going to be entrenched as a top 20 guy this year, but Robbie Anderson has been relegated to a deep threat only. That's pretty much all he's been doing so far this year. His average depth of target is over 18 yards right now. He is being only targeted downfield. He is not getting those same possession targets that we saw from him last year. And there's room for Terrace Marshall to carve out a 100+ target type of role in this offense, similar to what Curtis Samuel did in the slot last year. Terrace Marshall is a guy that is playing over 60% of his plays from the slot right now. And like I said, he's a 6'3" wide receiver with great speed. So he's going to have a size advantage over nickel corners. He's a guy that can play on the outside if they need him to, but playing in the slot will get him some more advantageous matchups. So if Terrace Marshall is available on your waiver wire right now, and even if you don't need a wide receiver, just pick him up, stash him at the end of your bench, and you might have a guy that is a sell high candidate a couple of weeks from now, similar to what we saw from Rondale Moore in week 2. He might have a blow up game, and suddenly people might be really willing to buy into this guy, and they might give you better options than you're looking for, or you can just continue to use the guy, because I think this can be a top 30 wide receiver, even as a rookie, even with DJ Moore there, even with Christian McCaffrey there when he comes back, even with Robbie Anderson there, because his role in the offense is something that Sam Darnold has gravitated towards in the past too, with guys like Jamison Crowder in the slot, with guys like Juju Smith-Schuster in the slot, who he had back at his days at USC. So Terrace Marshall, a guy that you definitely need to be picking up, stashing at the end of your bench. Another guy, and this is the big ticket item, the number 1 waiver wire ad on the week, and it's not even really particularly close in my opinion. It's Chuba Hubbard, running back, also from the Carolina Panthers. Chuba Hubbard currently 26% owned in Yahoo Fantasy leagues. Now, how much would I spend on Chuba Hubbard? Probably a big question for a lot of people. I'd be willing to spend between 30 and 60% of my fab budget on Chuba Hubbard. So if you guys missed out on Elijah Mitchell, if you missed out on some of the other big running back targets and you're in need of running backs, I have no problem spending $55, $60 out of 100 on Chuba Hubbard, because I think this is going to be a guy that is a, locked and loaded RB2 for the next couple of weeks at least, and maybe has some upside in case Christian McCaffrey re-aggravates his injury or has a setback or something like that. Could become more than that. So if you have a priority type of waiver wire ad league as well, I would be willing to spend my number 1 waiver priority on Chuba Hubbard as well. As you guys can see on the screen, Dr. Jesse Morris talked about Christian McCaffrey's hamstring injury, and he talked about the fact that he was not placed on IR, which basically means that CMC suffered a grade 1 hamstring injury. So his return is set to be about week 6, week 7 or something like that. He said week 4 is highly unlikely / very risky. Week 5 could still be possible. So what we're looking at basically is a 3 to 4 week injury timeline for Christian McCaffrey in Dr. Jesse Morris's opinion, and basically also what I've seen from other doctors as well. That sounds pretty accurate. So you're going to be getting an RB2 in Chuba Hubbard for the next 3 to 4 weeks. And like I said, if Christian McCaffrey re-aggravates something, then it could be more than that. And the reason I know that Chuba Hubbard is the guy that you want and not Royce Freeman is because once Christian McCaffrey exited this game, Chuba Hubbard outsnapped Royce Freeman 38-11. So that is a big time discrepancy in those two guys' snaps. He also outsnapped him 9-0 on 3rd and 4th downs. So, this is a pretty key figure, right? We want those long down and distance running backs. It's the reason that a guy like Antonio Gibson is frustrating some people right now, because we want guys that are involved on all 3 downs. And Chuba Hubbard, that was actually a concern of mine for him coming out of Oklahoma State this past year. And for those of you who don't know who Chuba Hubbard is, he's a rookie running back, 4th round pick from Oklahoma State. He was a Heisman finalist 2 years ago in 2019, had a bit of an injury-riddled season in 2020, so he fell to the 4th round, but this is still a talented running back. He's great speed, great burst, great contact balance. So Hubbard also tallied 10 carries and 5 targets once Christian McCaffrey exited the game on Thursday night, and Freeman only had 5 carries and 1 target. So basically what we're looking at with Chuba Hubbard, like I said, this is going to be a top 22, 24 type of running back that you can put into your flex spot, you can put into your RB2 slot if you lost Christian McCaffrey. And I think Hubbard is going to be a guy that actually is pretty productive as well, because I do think he's a talented player. He was my RB6 in the draft class, just behind Michael Carter and Kenny Gainwell. I had a 3rd round grade on the guy. He fell to the 4th round. So I think Chuba Hubbard's a talented player. If you can go get him for anything less than, 60, 70% of your fab budget, I think it's a good deal, because RB2s like Chuba Hubbard, with the ceiling and the volume upside that he could have in this offense, they don't come around a lot on waivers. So when they do come around, they usually are pretty expensive. So 40, 50, 60% of your budget is probably what I'd be looking to do for Chuba Hubbard. So some honorable mentions, either some guys that are 50% owned or guys that I'm just not willing to spend that much fab on because I think they're kind of traps. So my traps of the week basically are Peyton Barber, running back for the Las Vegas Raiders, currently 7% owned in fantasy leagues right now on Yahoo. 2 to 5% of my fab is all I'm really looking to spend on Peyton Barber, because one, I think Josh Jacobs is probably going to be back this week. They have an extra day's rest. They play on Monday night. It sounds like Jacobs might have been almost ready to play last week. So Peyton Barber is not a guy I'm going to be chasing because he had like a 20+ point game. I think he's probably fool's gold on the waiver wire. So I would just let Peyton Barber pass you by, even if you need a running back. If you want to spend something on him, like I said, 2 to 5% maximum is what I'm willing to spend on him. And then Royce Freeman, who I already kind of alluded to, I also think he's a trap. A lot of people are going to talk themselves out of Chuba Hubbard and into Royce Freeman because Royce Freeman is cheaper, and they've seen Royce Freeman be hyped up as a fantasy piece in the past. But Royce Freeman, frankly, just isn't that good. So I don't really want him. I at least give me the unknown factor of a guy like Chuba Hubbard. Maybe he's still that 2019 Chuba Hubbard that we saw be a Heisman candidate in that year. So Royce Freeman, he's 1% owned right now. 2 to 5% of your fab maximum is what I'm willing to spend on him. But the fact that we saw Chuba Hubbard get those 3rd down snaps really makes me question how much Royce Freeman's going to be involved. Because if you told me that Chuba Hubbard didn't get any of the 3rd down snaps on Thursday night once Christian McCaffrey left the game, then I would have been like, okay, Royce Freeman's a veteran. He's a good receiving back. He's good in pass protection. Maybe they use him as the 3rd down guy, but we saw Chuba Hubbard already used in that manner. So I'm not really chasing Royce Freeman on the waiver wire, and I don't think you should either. Now, some of these guys that are over 50% owned, if they are available in your waiver wire, if you're in a 10-man league or something like that, some guys that you should go pick up are Jacoby Myers, who's coming off of a double-digit target game, and he's a guy that is a favorite target of Mac Jones. Sony Michel, it sounds like Darrell Henderson is probably going to be out for this game as well. The injury that he suffered caused Cam Akers to miss 2 games last year, so it wouldn't shock me if Darrell Henderson misses another game for the same injury. And Sony Michel is, again, a guy that was seeing a large opportunity share of the Rams backfield and just had a horrible matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and still was able to perform relatively well. So if Sony Michel is available and you need a running back, he's definitely a guy that you can go pick up. And then Cordero Patterson, again, a guy that is like 60% owned right now. He's a guy that is getting a lot of targets in this Falcons backfield. For whatever reason, Matt Ryan is just really heavily targeting Mike Davis and Cordero Patterson, and they're using Cordero Patterson in a way that's giving him like a 6 to 7 carry, 6 to 7 target type of role. So if you need a running back, maybe you lost one to injury or something like that, Cordero Patterson is, you could do worse than Cordero Patterson off the waiver wire. So one guy that I just missed out on in terms of who just missed out on the top 5 is James Washington. And this is really dependent on Juju Smith-Schuster's health and Deontay Johnson's health, because if both of those guys are out or one of those guys is out, I think James Washington is a guy that you can maybe desperation flex, just because Ben Roethlisberger does trust this guy. He's talked him up in the past, and he might have a bigger role than some people think, especially if both of those guys are out. If both of those guys are out, he definitely probably would crack this top 5, but it sounds like Juju is only day to day. So I'm not going to put too much stock into James Washington. So moving from the waiver targets onto the streamers. And if you guys are looking for a streaming quarterback this week, there's a couple guys that I really like. So these 3 quarterbacks are streaming quarterbacks. If I'm looking for a quarterback, I lost one, for example, to injury or something like that, and maybe I'm in a super flex league, Teddy Bridgewater versus Baltimore should be a good matchup for him. He's at home. He's been playing well. Baltimore's defense hasn't shown to be the elite defense that we've known it to be in the past. So I think Teddy Bridgewater and those guys can take advantage of that. He's also been relatively productive so far in his stint in Denver. So I think Teddy Bridgewater is a guy that you can throw into your lineup if you are desperate at quarterback this week. Jimmy Garoppolo versus Seattle. Again, he's at home as well against the Seattle Seahawks, who've allowed a lot of passing yards, a lot of passing points to quarterbacks so far this season. So Jimmy Garoppolo, another guy that I like. And then Taylor Heineke on the road against Atlanta. Atlanta's defense hasn't been very good. We know Daniel Jones didn't have the greatest game against them last week, but Daniel Jones is also not that good of a quarterback. So Taylor Heineke, given the fact that he can run the ball a little bit, maybe if you guys are desperate in a super flex league, he might even be available on the waiver wire if you're in like a 10-man super flex or something like that. So Taylor Heinicke is a guy that I think you could throw into your lineup and do a lot worse because he does run a little bit. He does provide you with some big play upside. So moving from quarterbacks to defenses, if you guys need a defense this week and you're streaming defenses, I would look for a lot of these teams that are at home this week. As a general rule, I tend to like streaming defenses that are the home team because they usually play better. They get a 3-point advantage in terms of their Vegas line. We usually want to be targeting defenses that are at home and that are favored to win games. So good defenses are also something that I want to look for. So some of the defenses that I like this week are the Saints defense versus Daniel Jones, because, Daniel Jones is a bad quarterback. He's turnover prone and their offensive line isn't very good. So it could lead to a lot of sacks. It could lead to a lot of turnovers, potentially a pick six or a fumble recovery for a touchdown as well. So I really like the Saints defense this week against Daniel Jones. They're about 30% owned right now. So if they're available, they are probably my number one pickup at defense because I think the Saints are probably going to have a field day against Daniel Jones on defense. The Bears defense versus the Lions. Again, we haven't seen Jared Goff be too turnover prone so far, and their offensive line is relatively good. But I think this will be a low scoring game, which is also something that you'd want to target when looking for a defense. And the Bears defense, they have, some playmakers on the back end. Eddie Jackson and some of those guys can create some turnovers. And then we also know Khalil Mack can get home to the quarterback. So Bears defense, also a pretty solid one to stream this week. And then Green Bay, very low owned defense right now because they've been relatively poor in terms of getting fantasy points. But Green Bay versus Big Ben, I think is a pretty good matchup for that. We know that Green Bay has some playmakers like Alexander and Savage and some of those guys on the back end that could create some turnovers against Ben. Ben has looked really bad so far this season. I don't think he's a very good quarterback. I think he's completely washed up, and he's going to be a guy that I continue to target with my defensive streamers week in and week out. So if you guys enjoyed this video, of course, leave a like, comment down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. If you want access to our rankings, there's 3 ways you can get them. You can go to our website. $20 gets you access to the rankings. You can sign up on underdogfantasy.com, promo code FSE. You'll get $10 on top of whatever you deposit, and you'll get our rankings for free. And you can also sign up patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange. Link is in the description for that. So peace out, guys, and enjoy your day.